asbestos, and our consultant's going to figure out the most safe and cost-effective way to remove all that material. And finally, in the summer of 2010, we'll have the final report, which is the actual cost estimates for both removing all the hazardous materials and for doing the building demolition. This does not mean we are going to demolish every building, obviously. We have not made decisions, with the exception of the first phase that we're going to present tonight. The larger buildings are not in that first phase. We're not making any decisions. We're simply understanding the asbestos. We need to know the cost, whether it's demolished or whether a building is removed, because it has to come out either way. The demolition cost will tell us if buildings are ultimately demolished, what will that cost as well. Okay, I want to move on to my last presentation, and that is this, as I just mentioned, our proposal to demolish the first phase of demolitions on the property. We have three goals in this project. The first is, because the study is a lengthy one and will not be completed until the summer of 2010, I think there is a strong feeling among many members of this community and among our agency that we don't want to do nothing, defer any action till then. We want to be able to start doing some things on the ground while the larger study is being done. We want to remove buildings that do not have a potential adaptive reuse in the future. Buildings that do, we're not making any decisions on those. Those will be handled down the road, but buildings that are clearly not appropriate or eligible to be reused in the future, let's go ahead and remove them. And obviously we want to reduce the safety risks by demolishing and removing highly deteriorated structures that pose a safety risk to people that should not be in them. In terms of the regulatory framework, this kind of an action, demolishing buildings, falls under SEEKR, the State Environmental Quality Review Act. It is an action that we have to think about, and then we have to ask the question, does this action rise to the level of being an environmental impact statement? We will not make a final determination on that until the plan is done, but our initial review of the plan indicates that because we're only taking down buildings that are either not historically significant or are so far deteriorated there's no potential for reuse, that our action will not trigger a positive declaration, therefore an environmental impact statement will not be needed, nor will we run afoul of our requirements under the State Historic Preservation Act. Our agency many years ago determined that the former hospital property is eligible for listing on the State and National Register of Historic Places by virtue of being an intact and large example of how our society treated the mentally ill for over 100 years and how that evolved over time. So the property as a whole clearly is eligible for listing. Not every building, though, on it is historically significant or contributes to that. And so the buildings we're proposing for demolition, if it's so far gone, even if it was historic, we are proposing to demolish it. Other buildings, they may not be totally far gone, but they're not historically significant. The process for identifying buildings was really a team of agency professionals from both the region and our Albany office of engineering and park operations staff, qualitative site-based assessment, as well as our Historic Sites Bureau, Historic Preservation Field Services Bureau, to really just, stand there and look and walk through buildings and discuss them and decide which of these are important to reserve judgment for a future day and which are appropriate to go ahead and propose for demolition now. Recommendations. We are recommending to demolish 14 named structures on the property, comprising approximately 222,000 square feet of buildings, and the numbers you see here on the screen. And in a minute, we're going to be walking through pictures of each of the buildings. Those sites where we're doing demolitions, we would restore them and landscape the sites, as well as remove hazardous trees and any other hazardous issues in the direct vicinity of where we're working. We would also, in the former power plant area, we are not proposing to do anything with the power plant building at this time, but we are proposing to do some cleanup in that area, which would demolish some other vacant structures around the power plant, remove the smokestack, which is not in use, and we don't see any potential reuse for that smokestack, remove some tanks, salt storage shed, and some other things around the vicinity of the power plant. We would, in some parts of the park, remove, and the former psych center, remove various deteriorated and unneeded asphalt and concrete roads. Obviously not all the roads, but there are a number of roads that are really beyond safe use and would not have a future use under any scenario. We'd remove some of those. And finally, we implement an experimental steam tunnel remediation project to make sure that what we're proposing to do actually works in terms of being able to do this safely and economically. How do you get this material out of these long tunnels? It's not quite clear Potential costs, as I said, we did a study on the in 2007 on the 153 acres, and so we have detailed asbestos remediation and demolition costs for that portion of the property, of which 4 of the buildings are located on. Our engineering staff have identified very rough cost estimates, trying to extrapolate from that information for the additional 10 buildings. And I need to emphasize that the cost estimates are just that. They are estimates, best judgment. The actual cost of implementing this project will be determined through the state's normal competitive bidding process, where we put it out, firms bid, and the low-cost bidder is awarded the project. In round numbers, we think the cost of the demolition program is approximately $14 million. That's a conservative estimate. We tried to err on the high side. When we get into this, we'll actually see what a competitive process means. You can see by far the largest cost, $8.2 million, is demolition, and the other costs are there for you to read on the screen. We have not formally allocated this $14 million. That will need to happen before the project goes forward. At present, the one available source of funding is the $29 million appropriated by Senator Flanagan's lead and remaining available in the budget. And he is in agreement, as is Senator Fitzpatrick, that that's an appropriate use to spend some of that money. Once we go through this process and go through the public process, the general knows support for that. Next steps. We're here obviously tonight. We are accepting the written comments through April 9th. Following the public comment period, we're going to review all of the comments we received, both orally and in writing, and then we will release a final plan. That will include our formal seeker and Section 1409 historic preservation determinations. Prior to actually doing any demolition, we still have to draw out plans and specifications. We'll speak a little bit about that in a second. There would be the actual documents where we put out the bid so that firms bidding on the work would know what's expected. There are many still steps we have to go through in terms of completing the asbestos surveys in some of these buildings, finishing the process that we're embarked on tonight, drawing up the plans and specifications, bidding out the work, selecting a contractor. We are not in a position to offer a projected timeline of when this demolition might occur, assuming in fact we approve the plan and go forward. In rough estimates, because I know people are looking for some sense of this, it will certainly be more than a year before we will actually get to demolition as we work our way through the steps. We really can't commit to a timeline. What we can commit to is moving forward each piece in a timely fashion as quickly as we can within the control of our agency. Okay, I'm going to turn the rest of the presentation over to John Kowalczyk, who is our Deputy Regional Director here for the Long Island region. He's going to take you through pictures of each of the buildings proposed for demolition. Following that, we'll move to the public input session. I do want to say that there's information on your handouts. If you go to the New York State Parks website, which I just put in New York State Parks into Google, you will make your way quickly to. In the publications section of that website, if you go to the newsroom, you will see eventually a press release announcing this meeting. And if you go to that press release and scroll to the bottom, there's a link to a PDF file, which has essentially, it's a little bit different format, but essentially the same information you're about to see if you want to download it at home for your review, pictures of each of the buildings. So, John.
Thank you, Andy. My objective is simply to show you pictures and give you some very general comments about these buildings, and further comment from you can come in the public comment section. All right, this is Building 59, known as the Manufacturing or Medical Records Building. It's on the road into the Nisququogue River State Park. The roof is collapsing. You can see that we've placed a fence around the roof area. That's to keep climbers out. The design dollars will have to be spent in addition to the demolition of this because the building holds up the road. And so there'll have to be some engineering work that if that building is taken out, to be able to secure the road into the Nisququogue River State Park. Building 60, known as the power plant, is right behind building number 59. The roof is completely deteriorated. If you can see, there are some